So, and with that, we're going to open up the floor for questions and answers after Kevin's done. So with that, I'd like to introduce somebody who helped our family a great deal and is still helping our family a great deal, Kevin Lee.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take this stool out of the way.
Thank you, Christine. All right. First, I'd like to introduce myself for those that don't know me. There's a lot of people here that I've met before. It's nice to see you guys again. I'm Kevin Lee, like she said. I have a couple different companies that I run right now. One is Intervention Services, which is the company that she utilized to help her son. Intervention Services, it's been around about 6 years. Started by my brother and I. My brother battled crack cocaine addiction for 20 plus years or so. Okay, that's how I got into this. I can give you my credentials about me getting my psych degree from Purdue. No offense to Iowa Hawkeye fans. Did that help? Not really. Okay, it was a nice credential to off on the wall there. Certified chemical dependency counselor, that's me too. Does that matter? Not really. I passed the test. I got my credentials. What helped me is dealing with my brother for 20 plus years. Dealing with my mother, dealing with my brother. Dealing with everything that went with family dynamic that we were clueless. A lot of the things that you said that was my family early on. We wanted to help, but our helping was hurting. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about. The primary focus of this lecture is to talk about enabling. There's a lot of peripheral stuff that we're going to talk about too. Manipulations of the addict, tough love, things that are important. What you guys are going to get is a little snapshot of my family day that I perform with families. I'm not going to go into all the detail because we'd be here 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, right?
Right.
I don't think you guys are ready for that. But I'm going to give you just a little taste of it. What I don't want you to go is walk away from here thinking, hey, I can do an intervention now, or I have empowerment. Okay, I'm only giving you that little bit of taste. You guys have, you can call me up, offer free advice all day long, whatever you guys need. We'll have some Q&A after we're done here. But I'm here just to give you a little bit of information and to help you guys out in whatever way you may need help. I don't know if you're here for yourself, if you're here because of a loved one, or you're just curious about what we're going to be talking about. That said, going back to myself, the other company we have is called Sober Solutions, and that's a company that basically helps people find adequate treatment centers. It's basically a web-based referral source. Okay, and we just started that more out of necessity because so many families couldn't afford a $30,000 rehab, a $40,000 rehab, and that's the average cost of rehab these days. Whether it's a 28-day program at Hazleton, or whether it's Betty Ford Clinic, or whether it's the program that your son went to, they're costly programs. But there are 13,000 facilities in this country. I developed a company, and there's many others like it. I didn't invent this, but we started up a company that will help families find whatever is in their means and whatever their needs are. Okay, we will do that for you. I'm not here to self-promote, just give you a little background on myself. I also am not going to go into the big long story about myself and my brother and all that. I'll share that with anyone who wants to hear it. But basically, I've been there from the side of a family member that had an addict in our family, and it was rough. And a lot of what I teach to families comes from personal experience, our trials and tribulations that we went through. That said, I'd like to start with a little story. Sometimes you start with a joke, but I don't think anything we're talking about here is very humorous. So I'll start with a metaphor and a little joke, or a little metaphor and story about my son last year. My son, I have three children, 11, 8, and 2.5. So yeah, I have a lot of things that I'm looking forward to when they start hitting teenage years and that. So I know I'm in trouble too. Like we discussed at lunch, me having 3 kids, the chances of me thinking that my 3 kids, because of what I do for a living and because of the knowledge I have that they're going to be sober, not a chance. Not a chance. I'd love it. I'd love it if my kids only socially drank or socially smoked pot compared to what I've seen. Okay, ideally they're going to remain abstinent. Ideally I'm going to teach them good morals, good guidelines. But every family I've ever dealt with taught their children morals, ethics. Okay, they'll have one child that becomes an addict, and another one that they raise the exact same way that doesn't. Okay, and I'm not here to get into a big debate about nature and nurture, about whether you're born with it. I can discuss those things if you want, but that's a whole other lecture that can last a long time. Going back to my son, who's going to turn 9 in about 2 weeks. Last summer when he was 8 years old, he's out in the playing in the woods a little bit, and he sees a little cocoon of a caterpillar there. Okay, and he knows enough from science in school in 2nd grade, and that cocoon is going to be a butterfly that comes out. So he sees this cocoon, and he can see inside there that this little butterfly is struggling to get out, and he sees it's working its way through there. And so my son, being 8 years old, decides he wants to help. So what does he do? He opens it up just a little bit to give him that little breathing room. And sure enough, those little legs start poking out. And that caterpillar's still trying to struggle, and he's not getting out. So my son takes it and he opens it up a little more. Now a little more, that caterpillar gets out. And he keeps trying. So my son again opens up a little more. Now the caterpillar can come out of the butterfly. And what my son saw was kind of shocking. He didn't see this beautiful butterfly that was ready to fly away. What he saw was shriveled up little legs, shriveled up little wings, no big boisterous colorful wings. And why did that happen? Is anybody biologist, botanist here? A butterfly needs that process through their metamorphosis of actually going through the struggle of getting out of that cocoon, where it basically has enzymes that go out of the body and it floods into the wings, and that's what gives it its strength and its color and all of that. My son, with the best intentions, tried to help. And what happened? It had the opposite effect. The title of our little spiel here is When Helping Hurts. And that's what that analogy is for. My son helping that little butterfly hurt the butterfly, and with the best intentions. And that's what enabling is all about. And we'll cover enabling in a little bit. One thing that Christine mentioned was that there are different types of addicts, different types of users. Okay, I got a room full of people here, and if you don't mind, close your eyes if you don't want to know the answers, but who in here has had 3 drinks in their life at one time? I'll raise my hand because I know I'm one. Okay? You don't need your hands raised for this, but there's probably people in here that have smoked pot before. There's probably people in here that have tried cocaine. Maybe there's somebody that's tried meth or prescription pills, something like that. But all of us in here, most of us in here anyway, have been at least buzzed at one time or another. Now why? That's why you're here. I'm talking to rehab. No, not everybody becomes an addict. Not everybody that uses alcohol needs treatment. Okay, myself, I can get drunk. Okay, I've been drunk probably 3 times in the last year, and that's about what I do now because I'm old and boring and have 3 kids. But I can go out to the Cubs game, or I can go out, to a Super Bowl party and actually have quite a few drinks and be hungover the next day, and I won't drink again for 6 months. Why is that? That I can do that and my brother can't? Well, I'm type 1. And these types are not technical terms. They're basically from the big book, if there's any AA people in here. This is kind of where we derive this from. Type 1 is the moderate or social user or drinker. That's somebody that can have a social drink. They can socially smoke pot. Maybe he smoked pot in high school, doesn't see it for a year, sees one of his old buddies at a high school reunion, or some guys at the bar he used to go to college with, smokes a little pot, goes home, doesn't go out and have to buy a quarter the next day. He's a social user. He can take it or leave it. That was me pretty much all the way through high school. Even when harder drugs got introduced, I could try a drug and then all of a sudden not need it again. I always tell the story of my brother and I, we're very close in age. Okay, we're less than a year apart, and we partied basically with the same people. And during high school and our first year of college, we partied basically about the same amount. But looking back, I realized things were a lot different between him and I. I can't tell you how many times I smoked pot in high school. I just couldn't even guess at the number. My mother doesn't want to hear that number, but I can't tell you with certainty how many times I ever bought pot. Once. That was it, my entire life. And it's not because I was cheap, even though I kind of was. My brother, on the other hand, he couldn't tell you how many times he smoked it, couldn't tell you how many times he bought it. If he didn't have it, or if that last joint got passed around, their first thought is, where are we getting the next one? Okay, now even though Dave and I were smoking the same amount, it was 2 completely different kind of situations. He was not a social user. That's how he drank, that's how he smoked pot, that's how he ended up doing cocaine and crack cocaine. The second type of user is what we call a moderate user. Okay, this is somebody, or a hard drinker or drug user, excuse me. A hard drinker or drug user is somebody that uses maybe alcoholically for a time frame, but something happens in their life that changes their amount of abuse. Okay, for example, you talked about you married and had kids, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, those drinking years are behind me. It could be something as simple as that. It could be you're going to college and all of a sudden, something bad happens at college, your grades slipping, maybe a girl has too much to drink and something bad happens to her. I've had enough of that. Okay, a consequence could be a DUI. Somebody's driving along and they get a DUI and they say, you know what, I better not be drinking so much anymore. I better not be driving when I'm drinking. They make a change because of their use, and that's the second type. The third type, and the type I have to deal with all the time, is the real or actual addict or alcoholic. That's somebody that no matter what happens to them, no matter what consequence happens, they continue to use. And usually what happens is they end up using more, not less. Okay, they don't have the same thinking like a quote-unquote sober person has. Okay, and I'll get into why that is when we talk about manipulations a little bit. which actually, we'll go into that right now. What I want to talk about is you understand the basic nature of addiction and what goes on through a addict's mind, because that's the biggest problem a family has is they always have that question, what were they thinking? What was my son thinking when he did that? What was my daughter, what was my husband thinking when he went out and drank right after he got out of jail with a DUI? Don't get caught in that trap, because they don't think rationally. And again, that would be a whole other spiel to talk about the biological effects, talk about a wet brain, they talk about the withered brain, stuff like that. Alcohol and drugs do impair your thinking even when you're not on that drug or alcohol, okay? And again, not a discussion for today, but I want you to understand their rationality and their thought processes are not like ours. The basic nature of addiction with an addict or an alcoholic is they're trying to self-medicate. Everybody's probably heard that and everybody probably agrees with that to some degree. But a lot of the focus is that addicts and alcoholics are about one thing, and that is avoiding discomfort. Now, their discomfort could be physical discomfort, could be emotional discomfort, could be inability to cope or deal or be in social situations. It could be losing a job. They have some kind of discomfort and they can't handle it in a healthy way like we can, by maybe turning to God, okay, by turning to a loved one, by just dealing with the problem. It's easier for them to self-medicate, and that's what they do, avoid discomfort. To accentuate this point, I always like to talk about a scenario that will show you the basic nature of addiction and talk about the manipulations that an addict or alcoholic will do. In this scenario, we're going to think about confronting an addict or an alcoholic about their drinking or drug use. Okay, an intervention basically, and it doesn't mean a professional intervention. Anytime, just so you guys know, an intervention is any time you're trying to intervene on somebody, whether it's talking to your husband about them being out too late because they were drinking, or talking about them missing work again because of their drug use. Those are all interventions. Obviously, the ideal intervention is to do a professional intervention, get the entire family together, get some knowledge, and then move forward. But anytime you try and intervene, that is an intervention. So think about this scenario with an intervention where we're going to talk to the loved one. Let's just say we're talking to a son, say a 25-year-old son who's doing cocaine. Okay, we're going to talk to, and we'll call him David, just like my brother, to keep it simple. So we're going to talk to David about his cocaine use. How many people here think that that's a comfortable situation for David? Nobody, right? It's an uncomfortable situation. So he's going to have to do certain things to deal with his uncomfortableness. Ideally, what he would do is get high to avoid it, right? But he can't do that when mom and dad and brother or whoever is sitting in there and saying, David, let's talk about your drug use. Okay? You kind of mentioned, the first time you talked to him, and he did different things, didn't he?
Yep.
First thing he did was adamant denial.
Yep, just out and out lied. And one of the other things that, in my experience, is that they try to turn it back on you. They'll just totally change the subject and they'll make it something that makes you real uncomfortable, and that's a critical manipulation. Why are you driving the car so much? Or just total subject change.
Yep. Yeah, the first one is adamant denial, where they just deny everything. That wasn't my drugs. No, I wasn't. They'll even throw a little something at you. Oh, go ahead and drug test me. Which I'm shocked he didn't pass, because there's so many ways to
do it, because I never used to follow through.
He called your bluff, and then you called his.
Yep.
So adamant denial is a manipulation, basically, and it's a way of getting out of that uncomfortable situation, because what happens when a mother or father believes that manipulation? If they say, hey, it wasn't my drugs you found in my room, it was, and they of course pick the worst friend that they have, and that mother believes it, what happens? Problem goes away, doesn't it? No more talk about my drugs and my problem. They believe it was, Bob's drugs. Another type is offering of hope, where they're kind of cornered a little bit, and all of a sudden, you got them kind of busted. Maybe you did catch them they came in really high. So what do? They offer you a little bit of hope, which is, okay, fine, you know what? I'll quit. I'll never do it again. You can drug test me every day. That's giving you some hope, right? Hey, he's never admitted he had a problem before, and now he admits he has a problem. I feel great. You feel like you've accomplished something. But all he was doing was trying to get you off his back temporarily so he can get away from that uncomfortable situation. Another type is baby steps, which is a subset of offering a hope. Baby steps is when you throw, for example, Christine threw a long-term program at her son. If she was doing the intervention on her own, there was a good counteroffer, and I don't know if he did or didn't do this during our intervention, they'd want to counter with something less. Well, let me go to meetings. Say, for example, you say, okay, you need to go to this 28-day program. And he counters with, you know what, I admit I have a problem. And I'm going to start going to AA like he wanted me to do. A lot of parents will say, wow, he has never admitted he had a problem. And he's never certainly wanted to do anything about it. Look what happened. And they let him go to a meeting. And how often does that person get sober? Basically never. Okay, another manipulation. Another one is explosively reacting at it. You go to talk to him about his cocaine problem, he blows up at you, F you, mom, throws a tantrum, hits a wall, does this, does that. How does that make you feel as a parent or as a wife of that alcoholic? Let me ask you this, does it make you more likely or less likely to confront that person the next time? A lot less likely. They are basically teaching and training you, not the other way around. Okay? Another one is invalidation. I always hate when I do an intervention and they let the kid know, letting them know an intervention's coming is a whole different ballgame, but when they have maybe researched the treatment center and they try to do an intervention themselves and they say, okay, here's a treatment center we want you to go to, all of a sudden it fails, so they have to bring a professional in. Now once they know about the treatment center, what are they going to do? They've had time to get on that web and research it and invalidate it. Invalidation is the next one. Try and basically tell you, or even AA, oh, it doesn't work. I can tell you, 10 of my friends, all of them went to AA and all of them use today. And if you believe them, what happens? Oh my gosh, he's right. That doesn't work. So we back off. They win every time and they manipulate you. And the hard part is, you love that person, so you're easy to be manipulated. Next one is shifting the focus. You kind of started to talk about that one too, and that's let's talk about something else. You're going to talk to me about my drug problem. Well, what about you? You drink. What about this? I forget the examples you were throwing out there, but that was shifting the focus. Okay? We want to talk about the drug problem. All of a sudden, they're going to talk about, the infidelity you had if you're talking to your spouse that you had 4 years ago. Now you start defending yourself and how you've been good for 4 years, or, that's not the issue. And now we're talking about this instead of this. They're very good at shifting the focus. Okay?
Or they blame you, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that does shift the focus.
Mm-hmm.
Where have you been? You were never there for me as a mother.
I drink because you nag me.
Mm-hmm. And now you have to defend your nagging. And that, again, shifts the focus. Another one, and a very strong one, is a sympathy ploy. Especially if you deal with somebody that's been using for a long time. All of a sudden, there's a lot of things going wrong in their life. And you go to talk to them, hey, we got to talk about your drug problem here, David. And David says, yeah, you know what, I'm just nothing but a loser. I can't do anything right. I lost that job again. You wanted to attack it. What happens now? Are we ready to attack some more? We're like, oh man, he's right. I feel sorry for him. That's what happens because we love him. Again, it works. It makes us back off a little bit. Those are manipulations, and just some of them. We cover a lot more than that in our family planning session, but you need to understand those are manipulations that addicts use, some of them, to make uncomfortable situations go away. Now, our scenario talked about us confronting an addict about drugs. But the point I want you to understand is, this is how an addict deals with all uncomfortable situations. Okay, imagine that same addict or alcoholic lost his job. He's going to do the same kind of things. He's going to make you feel sorry for him. Okay, he's going to blame the boss, that it wasn't him. He gets pulled over for speeding against these cops are out to get me. Okay, he's always going to have excuses and manipulations anytime anything uncomfortable happens. A girlfriend breaks up with him, oh, she was this and she was that. It was her
And we
fault.
heard that with Alex. We watched that as he dropped out of Kirkwood, got mad at his dad, quit farming on the farm. It was just everything. He was blaming everything except what he really lacked was the self-responsibility of his life going down the tubes because he was using.
Yeah, these are symptoms. Symptoms of what's going on. And what I want you to understand, this is how the addict's mentality, addict's brain basically works. All right? Another example of what was he kind of thinking. If, let's say for example, any of us normal people here, your house payment is $1,000 a month. And all of a sudden, rent is due in 4 days, and you have $800. What do? We find out what our resources are, right? Find out if I can borrow money from somebody. Find out if maybe I can work an extra shift if I'm making cash at my job. That's what we would normally do, right? Find a solution to solve that problem. What do you think an addict's going to do that's $200 short of rent and has $800 in his pocket? Yeah, screw it, I can't make rent. I got $800. And he's going to basically deal with his uncomfortable situation. His uncomfortable situation is lack of rent. But it's easier for him to go out and self-medicate, use the drugs, and not worry about what's going to happen in 4 days. And when we get into enabling, you'll realize that most of the time what happens with an addict in that situation, they blew their $800 and somebody's there to bail them out anyway. So they never have the consequences that they should have. All right? Another thing about addicts and addict mentality is, a lot of times, especially when you look at somebody who's been using for a long time, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. There's a million different episodes where you keep thinking, what are they thinking and why would you continue to use after you've gotten 3 DUIs? Why would you drink again? Okay, if somebody lost their kids and they continue to use, you always think, what are they thinking, what are they thinking? No addict that I've ever met in the course of their addiction blames the alcohol or the drugs. Never. It's always that cop in town forgive me. It's that boss was a jerk. You know, if you showed up drunk 4 days in a row and the boss fired you, an addict is not going to see it as, well, hey, maybe I shouldn't be drinking at work. They see it as, you know what, they've always been out to get me. They never treated me right, so on and so forth. He will always blame outside sources. Basically what it boils down to is the solution cannot be their problem. Their solution is alcohol. Okay, how can alcohol that is a solution that solves all their problems be their problem? It doesn't make sense to their mind. To us from the outside, it makes perfect sense. Right? If you guys have any questions as I go, I don't mind an open forum. You guys can ask questions if you want, or I'll ramble on forever. I don't mind either way. You can save it for Q&A time, but interject as you want, okay?
Anyone wants to ask a question too, I can turn off that. We just copied that mostly for some people who wanted to be able to see this that couldn't be here tonight, so we can turn it off too if we want to maybe just turn it off, I'll turn it off.
Oh, if you want some
Yeah, I figured it for sure at the end, but if you wanted to interrupt, right, you know,
Sure.
and want to ask something personal or whatever.
Okay. And maybe we should shut that off for the Q&A session.
Definitely.
At the end. And going back to what I talked about, how the addict cannot see the alcohol or the drug as a problem, families are the complete opposite. What do families do? They want to blame the outside problems for the addiction. Okay? They want to say, you know what, the if only syndrome. If only he had a better job. If only he wasn't hanging around with those drug addicts. If only he had a better girlfriend. If only, you know, he had a better financial situation. Those are the reasons why, you know, Bob is drinking so much. All those reasons came because Bob drinks too much. It's not that we want to blame everything else because it's easier. All right? Talking about enabling, and again, that's the focus of what we're here for. I always start talking about enabling by defining helping versus enabling. Okay? They're very similar, and that's why families get confused, and that's why families end up enabling because they feel they are helping. Helping is doing something for somebody else that they can't do for themselves. Okay, the example I always use is if you have a husband that breaks his leg and the wife has to go out there and mow the lawn because it needs to get done. That's helping, right? She's doing something for him that he can't do for himself. Let's take the same scenario. Husband's an alcoholic that drinks all the time, has been drinking on a 4-day binge, and now he's passed out for the next day and a half, and he's not functioning, and the lawn's getting really high, so the wife's like, I gotta get out there and start the lawn and get the lawn mowed. Husband's on the couch, she's mowing the lawn. Drastic difference, though, isn't it? That's enabling. She's doing something for him that he can do for himself, but he's not because of the effects of drugs or alcohol. That is enabling. Okay? A lot of families talk, especially when we're doing an intervention. It's been probably a problem, and probably a hardcore problem for a long time. Okay, what I always tell families, especially on first consultations, is it's 10 times worse than you think. And I'm not trying to scare them to get them to do an intervention or scare them into, you know, trying to get their son or daughter or husband into rehab. I'm telling them a fact.
And that is a fact, because as Alex began to recover, sometimes, you know, that honesty comes back, and they have to share with us what the road was really like. And there were times on the phone when I'd say, TMI, too much information, I don't need to know anymore. That's enough. It was 10 times worse than I thought it was.
And there's reasons why I say that to people. There's reasons why you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Okay, like to say, when a family would call me up and said, I think my son has a drug problem, I say he does. This is my first sentence with this family. And I'm not trying to be cute or make a point. My point is, if that mother loves her son, which I know she does, that's why she's calling me, she's not able to see what I would see. Okay, her love will blind her. She has defense mechanisms in her brain that don't allow her to see what I would see. Okay? Every family does it. I did it with my own brother. There were friends we hung around with that knew my brother had a big problem long before I did, long before my mother did. Okay? Secondly, that mother that's worried about her son, 99 times out of 100, they have no expertise in this like I do. Okay? They haven't had alcohol classes. They haven't had lectures and you know, obtained psych degrees, and they haven't dealt with family members very often. They don't have a clue on what to look for. A recovering addict or even an alcoholic would see more signs than that mother would see. Okay? And the third and most important thing is, with any addict or alcoholic, what do they do with their use? Do they do that cocaine right in front of you? Or did they hide 100% of their use and or abuse? Okay, they may socially drink around you, okay? Or they may show up at that wedding and say, wow, you only had like 5 drinks, but he probably had about 5 or 6 before he got there. Okay, they hide their abuse, or they hide 100% of their use. So if you think there's a problem, and then you realize, you know what, they're hiding all of it, you don't know what to look for, and you can't see it anyway, that's why I say it's 10 times worse, every single time. I've never done an intervention where all of a sudden, at the end of the day, the problem is a lot worse than the mother thought. It's never going to happen. So you ask yourself, when you see an addict that's really down, on an addiction curve, when he's really hitting some, what you would think is bottoms, and I'm going to talk about bottoms in a little while, why won't that person get help? You would think, man, he's got 3 DUIs. Wow, the wife took the kids. Wow, he lost his house. He lost his good job. Why isn't that person getting help? And the answer is very simple. The answer is, the reason any addict or alcoholic is not in treatment boils down to one simple solution. The fact is, they're using whatever it is, whether it's alcohol or drugs, is more comfortable to them than the thought of going into treatment, getting into recovery. It's easier for them. It's more comfortable. Okay, and that's a fact. Part of the reason it's more comfortable is what? Enabling parents, enabling spouses, enabling everybody, siblings, friends. Everybody enables. I hate to say it. The legal system enables. Doctors enable. It's not just loved ones. Everybody does, and it's always with the best intention. That doctor is writing you a prescription because he thinks you have a bad back. They're not as schooled as they should be in addiction. Okay, and the legal system doesn't do checks and balances enough to realize that that same guy has been to 3 doctors that day for the same problem. Okay, enabling goes on all different kind of levels. It's not just letting my son, who's a drug addict, live in my house. That's just one little form. Okay, but the reason most addicts or alcoholics are not in treatment is because we make it comfortable for them. They have no job because we provide what they need. Okay, they're not in jail because we bail them out. Bills aren't a problem because we don't pay their bills for them. Okay, the addiction becomes a secret because we help keep it a secret. We don't want to tell grandma about the problem. Grandma doesn't need to know. Grandma's a little older. She doesn't need that stress in her life. Or we don't want to punish our son. Well, let's just hide this because, Aunt Marcy doesn't need to know what's going on. So the problem that should be this big is only this big to the addict or alcoholic because there you guys are cleaning up the mess. Okay? Who feels the addiction worse? The family or the addict? Every time. You guys are feeling the effects of the addiction more so than them. All right? And when it comes to the addiction and what enabling does for the addict, enabling does for the addict exactly what the drugs were doing. When we talked about manipulations, we told you that basically what it does is it makes it more comfortable for him. Okay? It's his escape. He uses drugs to avoid those uncomfortable situations. Enabling takes those uncomfortable situations and takes care of them for him. By enabling, you're doing what the drugs do. Okay? And you're doing it better than the drugs do in many cases. All right? There's different types of enabling. I'm going to cover some of these. Like I said, I cover about twice as many during a family session, but I'm going to cover some of the major ones so you guys can understand exactly what enabling is. Like I said, most people, when they think enabling, they think, okay, the kid is living in the basement, mom's paying all the bills. Yeah, those are some hardcore examples, but there's a lot of subtle ways to enable, and we're going to cover some of those. First, I have to start by talking about rationalization, because it's technically not enabling, but rationalization is a semi-reasonable excuse on why somebody uses. Okay, the example I use in every family day is a guy named Mark Shiner who was in Washington, D.C. Mark was 44 years old and in a wheelchair at the time of the intervention. 8 years before the intervention, he was on his motorcycle and got hit by a truck and was confined to a wheelchair. He was a crack cocaine addict. Okay, his rationalizations were, I'm in a wheelchair, this really sucks, I'm in a lot of pain, and he started using drugs. Started with just prescription pills and progressed on to things that dealt with his pain a lot better. He was also ADD, and if anybody knows anything about ADD, what they give most of the time for ADD is what? Speed. Call it Ritalin, call it Adderall, call it what you want, I'll call it legal crack. Okay, because that's what it basically does. And it works. Okay, I'm not slamming Ritalin, I'm not slamming Adderall. It works for what it's supposed to do. But for Mark, it was also another way of, the crack did the same things Adderall would do, but to a much higher degree. So here's Mark smoking crack because he's got a lot of pain he's going through from his accident. He's got a lot of mental things going on that this is straightening out. So those are his rationalizations. And as I tell this story to every family, and the reason I told it here, I see some people kind of nodding along, that they can understand what Mark is going through. What you're doing is enabling. That's justifying. When you agree with an addict's rationalization. I'm the guy that wrote this book on enabling, and when I got to that intervention, that's the first thing I did, is poor guy in a wheelchair. I can see why he became an addict. You know, I try and stay active. I still play baseball, I still play softball. You know, and I try to go to the gym. And if something happened to me where I was confined to a wheelchair, I can't say what I would do. Okay, but you got to ask yourself this question when it comes to justifying somebody's use. Does my actions make it easier or harder for that person to use? Everybody looked at Mark and said, wow, I can see why he's using crack cocaine. Made Mark's life a little bit easier to be an addict, didn't it? They didn't judge him like they judge other addicts. Okay, they justified for him. Okay, and there's other forms of justification. It could be, you know, hey, my son's 21 years old, everybody drinks. That's a justification. It makes it easier. If your son is 21 years old and drinking alcoholically, and your attitude is, hey, he's doing what I did when I was 21. He's doing what his friends are doing. It's not a big deal. Does that make it easier or harder for him to go out and drink every day? It makes it a lot easier. Okay? Another form of enabling is denial. Denial is not believing anything is really going on, or putting yourself in denial so you're not seeing what you need to see. This is what happens, where basically everybody starts in some form of denial, and eventually people kind of open up their eyes to it. And at the end, some people will still be in denial. But they just, like I said, usually it's an emotional connection that makes you in denial. You just don't want to see it. I don't care what it's saying. It's like, no, that was not my son's. No, I don't believe it. What every family member does is kind of a subset of denial, which is called minimizing. Which is, here's the problem. It's this big, but you only see it as that big. Okay, you minimize it because you love somebody. You do not want to see it. And this doesn't mean just drugs. Okay, if anybody in here has kids, you minimize. Your kid does something wrong or gets, you know, in a little trouble at school. Sometimes the first thought is, you know, he didn't have problems with that teacher last year. Maybe that teacher's fault. You know, or maybe it's not that bad. Or if he gets in a fight at the playground at school, it's like, you know what, I know that other kid started. My kid's always been a good kid. We minimize it. You see what you want to see. And that becomes unhealthy when it comes to, especially to addiction. All right? Blaming others is one of our favorite ones. Blaming other people for their actions. Okay? If your son was an addict and he just got introduced to that drug by that girlfriend of his, who we blame? Our son or the girlfriend? Girlfriend, every time. Okay, or the friends that, you know, started coming around who were those bad friends. Right? It's easier to blame them than it is our loved one. Okay? And again, it's easier for that addict to basically agree with you. You're right, it was her. You know, I'm screwed up because of her. Blaming ourselves is another one, and one that parents do quite a bit. I still have families I counsel that say, you know, where did I go wrong? The kids in treatment, everything's going well. Quit worrying about what you did wrong, because you know what? It wasn't anything you did or didn't do. Most parents I deal with have multiple kids. Okay, and usually 3 out of the 4, 2 out of 3, 1 out of 2 are doing well, and we're talking about the addict. And I'm pretty sure in every family, they didn't raise them completely different ways. It is not because mom didn't hug enough as a child. You know, it is not because dad missed that first baseball game. It is nothing the parents did or didn't do. Okay, maybe there's a lot of mitigating factors in every situation. But that's not the reason they used. You understand that? Another enabling behavior is taking over responsibilities. And again, this is one that happens early and often, especially with younger addicts, because you feel it's your role anyway. You know, if your son's 20 years old, 21 years old, you feel it's your job to help him with his laundry or help him with his bills, or you know, get him his, you know, get insurance for it, do things like that. You take over his responsibilities, but you will do it more and more with an addict, and they will have to do less and less. You will take over all the responsibilities. Not keeping your word is another one. You say, oh, if you come home drunk again, you're thrown out of here, or I'm leaving you. You're talking to your spouse, and what happens? Husband comes home drunk again. They have a little fight. He sleeps it off. Maybe goes to his buddies for a day. Comes back 2 days later with flowers, whatever. And what happens? Just don't let it happen again. Okay, we don't keep our word. What we're doing is, you know, training them the wrong way. Enduring is the next one. Enduring is never knowing when enough is enough, and you keep putting up with more and more and more. You'd be amazed when you talk to a family that's been in the grip of addiction with their loved one for 10 years. It's amazing what they're doing 10 years down the road versus what they were doing 10 years ago. And you'd be surprised what they would do 10 years down the road after that. I always use the example of a guy that works for me named Mike. we did Mike's intervention 3 or 4 years ago by now. And Mike was a heroin addict. Mike started off, he had a shoulder injury. He was never, he never had addict, addict mentality. He wasn't a drinker in high school, wasn't really a drinker in college, but he had a sports injury. I think he blew out his rotator cuff, something like that. Started on some pain pills, and that's how a lot of addicts start. Okay, started on the Tylenol, codeine, progressive Vicodin, OxyContin. Course of years, he's shooting heroin. Is basically where it led to. So after about 10 years of shooting up heroin, his parents went through everything. Okay, every up and down they could go through, and his father basically only knew a couple things: that he didn't want his son dying, and he didn't want his son to go to jail. His son had been to jail already, and he didn't want to see that happen again because he was going to get put away for a lot longer. If anybody knows any heroin addicts, they're notorious for pawn shops. They will steal whatever they can steal from whoever they can steal from, usually the loved ones first. You think of the opposite, they steal from strangers, and then if they have to, loved ones, no. They'll steal from the loved ones because it's easier, because we won't throw them in jail. So that's what Mike was doing. He would steal Dad's TV, VCR, DVD player, PlayStation 3, whatever was around then. PlayStation 3 probably wasn't, but he would take it to the pawn shop. So what would Dad do? Get some money, go to the pawn shop, get his TV back. After a couple of years of that, wondering what's missing today, and I'm wondering if the pawn shop has, and then going to the pawn shop and getting it, that got to be a little too much for Dad. And he still didn't want to call the police on his son for stealing his stuff. So what did he do? He started leaving cash out on the table. He knew Mike would see the cash. $40 a day is all a heroin addict needs for his fix. So Dad felt it was easier to let Mike steal $40 a day than have to go worry about where my stuff is, what stuff is missing, and what's going on. Now, do you think, let's rewind 10 years, because it took 10, 12 years to get to that point with Mike's dad. Let's say day one, and Mike's first stuck a needle in his arm. You think Dad's like, how much does that cost? Is that $40? I'll give you $40 for that. No, because Mike's father endured for so long, that's where it became. Example I use in my own life is with my brother. When I got married first go around, September of '95, my brother was in and out of rehab all the time at that point, living in California. Mom got him a plane ticket so he can come out to be in my wedding, and he was still my best friend and only brother I have, so I wanted him to be best man at my wedding. And of course, Mom said he was sober, and God knows if Dave says he's sober, he must have been. She has a brilliant idea, no offense, Mom, when you watch the tape, that Dave should stay at my house because he needs a place to live, and I need somebody to watch the house while we're on our honeymoon. So you know where this is going. We come back and Dave ripped us off from half our stuff in the house when we got back from our honeymoon. It's a wonderful way to start a new marriage. Okay, what did I do with that situation? I've been dealing with Dave using at that point about 8 years. I did everything we talk about with the neighbor. I made excuses for him. I said he'll pay it back. He'll go to rehab. He has a problem. So on and so forth. Everything but the right thing. What did my wife want to do? She'd been enduring for about 30 seconds. By the time we opened the door till we saw, hey, our cash is gone. What did she want to do?
Turn him in.
Turn him in. Well, pardon my language, kick his ass and then turn him in. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to protect him, okay? Because I'd been enduring for 8 years at that point. Okay, if you rewind 8 years when he first started when I was 16 years old, and I was a workaholic when I was 16, and I saved all my money. By the time I was 17 years old, I bought a Firebird that was like 1.5 years old, which my parents didn't have money. I had to buy this all myself. Like I said, I worked 40 hours a week in high school, saved all my money, and bought this wonderful car. That was about the first year my brother started using cocaine. If I came home when I was 17 and all of a sudden Dave stole my car and sold it for drugs, how would I have treated it then? A lot differently. He sold the same thing 8 years later, but I did something completely different. Enduring is very powerful. You will put up with more and more. We talk about addicts going down a curve. The families go right down with them. They keep putting up with more and more and more. Families are affected as much, if not more, than the addict. All right? The last enabling behavior I want to talk about is called waiting. Okay, waiting for them to hit that bottom. Okay, has anybody heard that phrase? Kind of wait for an addict to hit bottom? Okay, I don't need to know if you agree with that or not. In my opinion, it's an old school thought. It's still talked about a lot in AA, but it's talked about in different ways. The old school ways, it was 100%, you cannot help an addict or an alcoholic until they want help, until they hit that bottom and come to you for help. The bad part is, what happens while you're waiting? Let's talk about a strategy, or a scenario here. Let's say we're talking about a 35-year-old married guy, 2 kids, drinking, between heavy drinking and alcoholic drinking, and starting to dabble in some cocaine. How far do you think he is from hitting a bottom? Let's say his kids are like 2 and 5. Is it gonna happen a year from now?
Oh, no.
Next week? Probably maybe 5, 10, 15 years before he hits that bottom. Reality is he'll probably never hit that bottom. But let's say whatever you guys think a bottom might be. You might think, okay, when the wife leaves him, that's a bottom, or maybe he loses his job, or maybe the kids go, or has some health problems. And I'll tell you right now, all those things are going to happen over a longer period of time, and none of them are going to be a bottom for him. So we're taking this 35-year-old that we're waiting for him to hit that bottom. What happens along the way? Who's affected? That 2-year-old, that 5-year-old. That 2-year-old becomes a 3-year-old, and becomes a 5-year-old, and a 10-year-old that has only known one type of father, the alcoholic, the drug addict. He's affected as much, if not more, than dad is. Okay? Finances are affected. The wife who's sitting idly by, waiting for her husband to hit bottom, is going to lose her house.
Okay, you got that all wrong. We're not idle. We fix, manage, and control.
Of course.
And we enable.
Yeah.
We're not idle.
Yeah, you take something that should take 15 years and make it 25 years.
That's right.
So hitting bottom, is it a helpful strategy or is it a myth? And I would say it's closer to being a myth. Okay, because again, an addict that should be feeling the bottom, the family is feeling instead of that person. Okay, and they will never hit it. And there's an AA phrase that says, when an addict hits a bottom, what they do is find a shovel. They dig themselves a deeper bottom. Okay, I was talking about my brother again, where he went through the course of his cocaine addiction to overdosing at least twice that I know of, which if anybody knows anything about cocaine, it's very hard to overdose on cocaine. But he woke up in the hospital a couple times with tubes in his arms on an overdose. He lost girlfriend after girlfriend, lost his wife. He went literally from having a Corvette in the driveway to within months sleeping under a bridge in San Diego. Okay, he lost great paying computer jobs he had. He had a $70,000 a year job in California like that because he was a computer genius and lost those jobs. Always had to celebrate after a promotion. He got promotion, I knew he was done. Okay, he had all those consequences. Do you think any of those got Dave sober? Not one of them. Not one. Let's backtrack. Let's say the first 6 months David is using cocaine. 17, 18 years old. And all of a sudden his girlfriend leaves him because of it. Mom throws him out of the house. He loses his job. He has some legal problems. And basically he has a health episode. If all that happened to him in his first 6 months of using, could that be a bottom? It very well could be. Okay, and that's what the power of an intervention can do, which we'll talk about, is manipulate the bottom. Instead of waiting for them to hit it, we can raise that bottom to them. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But when it comes to hitting a bottom should not be your first strategy, but a last resort. Okay, sometimes they do need to feel consequences. Okay, but like I said, sitting idly by, waiting for them, or like you said, making it so they don't feel like you keep helping them out. It's going to take forever. Okay, it's an estimate that 350 people per day hit a bottom that you can't bounce back from. That being death because of alcohol or drugs. Are you willing to wait for that for your loved one? Because I'm going to tell you right now, life in prison or death is usually the bottoms that end up hitting.
Or insanity.
And that, there's countless others. That's why I wrote down here, go to prison, go insane, or just lose everything. Is that what you're going to wait? Well, he's got to lose everything. So now his wife ends up losing everything too. His kids haven't seen a father for 12, 13 years, at least not one of the parents. Too many victims happen waiting for that strategy. So we don't wait for it. All right? Besides that, bottoms are usually temporary anyway. Okay, once the problem leaves, what happens? The using returns. He gets fired for that. All of a sudden, boom, oh my gosh, look, a terrible situation happened. I got to quit doing cocaine. He gets another job, what happens? He'll start using cocaine again. Okay? Once the problem leaves, the using will return. So like I said, instead of waiting for that bottom, let's manipulate that bottom. Okay? Bring that bottom up to that. Hazelden did a study, and I want to say they did thousands and thousands of sober addicts that have been in recovery, and I don't recall how much sobriety time they had, but they polled all these addicts and they asked them what got them on the path to recovery. How many do you think said, well, I hit a bottom? I don't know. 77% said somebody intervened. Somebody cared enough to say, listen, we're here to help you. Listen, there's a better way. Okay, 77% were in recovery because of somebody else. An intervention. And like I said, an intervention could be one-on-one talking to somebody, being there for them. Ideally, especially like I said, with what I do for a living, I believe a professional, full-blown, bring everybody in the family intervention is what is necessary. You need all this information I'm giving you, because it's not about getting them into treatment anyway. That's why I tell families every time I get on a call with them, I say, you're not calling me up because you want your son sober, or you want your son in rehab, excuse me. You're calling up because you want him sober. And there's a difference between going to rehab and being sober. Okay, a lot more is entailed with getting somebody sober than just getting them in the door of some treatment center. All right? I'm gonna, just because I find this kind of fascinating, just focus on just alcoholics for this next little part here. Okay, alcoholics only, because obviously everybody knows heroin affects your body differently than alcohol does, than cocaine does, than meth does, and all that. So what I'm going to talk about right now is strictly with alcohol. I'm going to name off some health problems here. And I want you to think about these things. Irregular heartbeat, stroke, ulcers, irritable bladder, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, impaired judgment even when sober, emotional isolation, higher anxiety and nervousness, reduced concentration, memory loss, sleep disorders, fatigue, depression, and I can go on and on. Is anybody surprised that that's what happens to alcoholics? Would you be surprised if the list I just told you was actually the effects of both alcoholics and family members of alcoholics? Stress kills you. Okay, this is how you're affected. All right? Families are affected more than the addict or alcoholic. And I'm talking physically. I'm talking spirituality. I'm talking financially. You guys feel it. Okay? But there's a solution. Okay? Intervention. And I'm not saying intervention is the solution because we need to get this person in rehab and so on and so forth. Anybody that's ever worked with me knows, especially because of my background, what I'm there for is the family. Because I know, when my brother started doing interventions, his thought was, I got to help some people from going down the road I went down. So he would want to intervene and he would want to talk somebody out of that road. My philosophy is, I need to change everybody around that person because that has more lasting effect. If I change mom, dad, brother, cousin, grandparents, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, if I change all those people around an addict, I don't care if he goes to treatment that next day. I don't care if he checks himself out of treatment. I don't care if he relapses the day he gets out. If I've done my job with that family, we've made a permanent change in the family that will eventually down the road, whether it's that next day or whenever, get that person on the path of recovery. Okay, otherwise you can do what my family did, which is keep throwing my brother into rehab. 22 rehabs later and a lot of money, all of a sudden we were still looking at an addict. It wasn't until my family decided to make some changes that we got some better results. Okay, so my intervention style, and a lot of intervention companies do this, but like I said, it's my focus to change the family in order to change that addict. Okay, intervention can be the solution, and it's a permanent solution. All right? When it comes to helping an addict, there's only two ways to help, if you ask me. One is to help them stay sick, and the other way is to help them get better. And you gotta make a choice. Obviously, helping them stay sick is called enabling, while helping them get better is called intervening. Okay, make your choice. Does everybody pretty much know what an intervention is? I know we've kind of danced around it, and I'm not going to get into whole details about, okay, this is what happens, this is what we do. And I've done right around 300 interventions myself personally. My company does about 300 plus a year. I have a million different intervention stories, but like I said, I'm not going to bore you with that. Intervention, the process for our company, just so you have an idea, is we get the family together for a family day, where we spend an entire day going over all kinds of stuff like this. And we also go over a lot of the details surrounding the addict or alcoholic. Okay, we do a lot of game planning, we do a lot of family education. We give you the tools necessary for the long haul. Okay, one of the most important things we do with that family is unite that family. Unite the family, unite the friends, bring everybody together. Because let's take that 25-year-old cocaine addict named Dave. Everybody around him, let's say he's been using for 5 years. For 5 years, once it became evident it was a problem, what did everybody do? Everybody always tried to help, right? Dad tried to help, mom tried to help, brother tried to help, boss tried to help. Everybody tried to help at their own time in their own way. So what happens? Even people that intervene. Maybe his boss came down on him. Maybe mom came down on him. What happens when mom comes on? Well, I'm going to go to dad and leave mom alone for a while. She's making my life miserable. They will always find a weak link. And if they find that, they'll use forever, and that's why they end up in that cycle. And the intervention brings everybody together and gets them all on the same page at the same time. The interventions that quote unquote fail, that they don't go to treatment, every time ever that I've known, it's because basically somebody in the family cracked. And like I said, it's easy for me to preach what to do, but when it's your son, and you have to look at your, I don't care if it's your 40-year-old son, and say no, it's very hard.
One of the things that stands out in my memory of our family day was he said that, the user can find it easy to cut one person out of his life, or even 2 or 3. But when it is the entire family that says it's drugs or it's us, 99.9% of the time, they choose the family.
Mm-hmm. Most families
That's
can't, they
powerful.
can't, yeah. Addicts cannot do addiction by themselves. They need help with their addictions. They need you to sit there and clean up the little messes behind them. They can't do it on their own. They need that family connection. They need that family help. All right. Another thing an intervention does is creates a longer-term plan. Like I said, too many interventionists out there. Basically, you want to go in there and go, hey, I'll give you my guarantees. I'm 99% successful. Blah blah blah. I'll get your son into treatment. I can say that every time too. Give me enough tools. Give me enough, promises I can give them. I'll get anybody to treatment. But the goal is to keep them in treatment. The reason why a lot of treatment centers utilize my company isn't because we're successful in interventions. You can read 1,000 different books, and all of them will tell you interventions are at least 85% successful in getting somebody into treatment. Treatment centers utilize my company because we help keep them there. They're more likely, because of what we do for the family, to keep them there, or if they leave, to get them back into treatment. It's a long-term plan we create with families. It's not about just getting them in that door. I think I mentioned this before. Another thing it does is creates permanent changes within the family. You'll attest to that. I mean, you've said it a million times.
I
the
gave
last thing
Alex
I
$1
had.
million ultimatums. You can't, we're gonna take your truck away, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and didn't follow through on it. But I learned the difference between a bottom line, which was, I said what I meant, and I meant what I said, and I intended to follow through. A bottom line is very different than an ultimatum. And now, we have a bottom line. We never had to read that letter to Alex, but we all agreed on a pretty serious bottom line. We chose drugs, or he was out of the family, period.
And the permanent change we made that if heaven forbid Alex relapses, whether it's 6 days or 6 years from now, you're still
It was interesting, he graduates tomorrow, and the intervention center asked us to send a letter, my husband and I to send a letter, and I sent a very thoughtful, loving letter, but I said, Alex, the bottom line is still bottom line. He needed to know that, and I needed to say that.
And I completely agree. He needs to know what could have been a mistake.
Yep.
That's talking about your intervention, if you don't mind me talking about it a little bit.
That's fine, go ahead.
I did an intervention right after their intervention, I believe out in California somewhere. It was a very eerily similar intervention. Okay, same solid family, same age addict, completely different drug of choice, but even the intervention went very similarly. They were very similar in the way they went. Okay, your intervention with Alex, we had a hurdle or two here and there, but it was actually a very smooth intervention because, like I said, they're not ready to do it without the family. Alex went, it wasn't because of anything I said, even though I think I spoke perfectly and it was all because of me. But he went because he loved his family and he was tired of the addiction. Okay. Actually, he's in the camera. Sorry. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care if you camera. I just hang my back right on camera all day. But doing Alex's intervention, we went in there and did the family day, and then we did the intervention, and the intervention went, like I said, very smooth, very easy. Alex tried to do his, had his objections why he couldn't or why he didn't have a problem, pointing fingers. He did a lot of the typical things, but nothing was insurmountable. A couple words here and there, and some things you brought up, and his father, and everything went very smoothly. As Christine talked about, he went to treatment, very willing. He went through treatment after he was there for, when was the first negative phone call?
Oh, about a month ago.
Okay, had some problems going through one section of that, which is normal. Okay, he's going to have ups and downs, but solid family. Was there a weak link in our group?
Nope. No, everybody said, too bad, Alex, you gotta do it.
Yeah,
Gotta get off the hook.
even the friends that weren't involved in the intervention knew it was at stake, and
Yeah.
that wasn't an option. Okay, so it went very well. Had there been, let's say, a cousin or an aunt or an uncle or somebody that he was very close to, been involved in the or wasn't involved in the intervention or didn't buy into it at all, and he would have called him up wanting to come home, I think the chances are pretty good he could have came home. If somebody in your
If there was a
family,
weak link, sure.
yes, okay.
Mm-hmm.
The intervention I did soon after that, Same kind of scenario, young addict, actually, addict in my opinion was using harder drugs and was actually worse off than your son was. But the family dynamic was all pretty much the same. Intervention was pretty much the same, where it went very smooth, some objections, so on and so forth. Not a problem, get him on a plane, let's go. The only difference in those two situations were, in the other one, there was a girlfriend and a father that weren't involved in the intervention. So what happens when that kid is having trouble at rehab? Calls up the girlfriend. The girlfriend was supportive early on, but wasn't involved in the actual intervention. She buys into his manipulations because she wasn't trained, because she wasn't there. So what happens with girlfriend's father? He knows he's a good kid, always been a good kid to my daughter. Oh, he believes all his stories. He's been at rehab for 60 days. He's got to be good now. Most rehabs are 30 days. So what does that father do with the best intentions? Helps him get home. Where's that kid right now? Who knows? Using drugs, probably. Okay? There's nothing that family could have done because you had an outside person. But because if we've done our job correctly, the family's going to get closure. We'll talk about that a little bit in a little while. But eventually that kid's going to come around. Right now he's hitting a weak link. Okay? He's going to survive for a while on that. But what's going to happen? That kid's a user. He's going to continue to use again if he's not already. And what's going to happen? That father is going to open up his eyes. Wow, what's going on? The girlfriend that was on the same page day one, they got manipulated by him. It's not going to hold for long. She's going to realize, wow, it wasn't enough time in rehab. And it's going to be a long process, and I don't feel sorry for the family I feel very sorry for the family has to go through that, but it is a process. An intervention's a process that's ongoing. And God bless Alec, I'm glad he's done well. But we have to keep working at it.
Yeah, I don't expect the Bluebird of Happiness to take up residence in my home. We have some, Vita Davis, halfway house. We'll have our healthy boundaries, not walls, but boundaries that we'll be setting for him, that he'll be expected. If he doesn't, follow through on that, then he's on his own.
And that's the next thing I'm going to talk about, and this is the last section to talk about here, which is bottom lines or tough love. Is everybody familiar with the term bottom lines, tough love? It's been around a long time. Okay, but there's a right way to do it. Okay, ideally you detach from somebody, but you detach with love. Okay, this isn't ultimatums. This isn't punishment, even though that's the way an addict or alcoholic would feel. Oh, if you're going to talk to his wife, you're going to leave me. That's punishment, right? Okay, but there's a big difference. Bottom lines or tough love is about protecting ourselves from an addict. An ultimatum is, you have an alcoholic husband and the wife says, you know what? If you don't quit drinking, I'm taking the kids and I'm leaving. That's an ultimatum, right? Think it's very effective? Not really. Okay. A bottom line or tough love in the same scenario would be the wife talking to the husband and saying, honey, I love you very much, but your drinking is destroying our marriage. It's affecting our kids. Our kids are affected every day. They're young and they're getting older and they're seeing more and more you're drinking. And it's destroying them. And I can't see this happen to our family. Financially, we can't even afford a vacation because you keep losing time at work. I can't do this anymore. And if you don't want to quit drinking, I have to protect myself and the kids and I'm leaving. That's a bottom line. It says the same thing as that ultimatum. But like you talked about, it's about communication. It's about how you say things, the way you approach a family member, and the way you talk to them that can be effective. Okay? There's reasons why you need to go to bottom lines. Most importantly, you need to alter your life so you're no longer negatively affected. Okay? You don't throw your husband out, due to his drinking to punish him. You do it because you can't handle it anymore. You have to make changes to save yourself. You're affected by the husband's drinking, so you have to make changes that you're leaving, you throw them out, or you take the kids, or whatever you decide to do, but they have to be for you, not to have an effect on him. The second reason you go to bottom line is so you're no longer contributing to the addiction. If you're having a son stay with you, I don't care if he's 20 years old, and your other kids stayed until they were 21, but they were in college, and you got this kid who's just basically mooching off you and using his drugs. I'm going to tell you right now, you're buying his drugs. The money he's not having to spend on rent, he's spending on his drugs. Give him money for drugs. Give him a little more. You might as well. I don't mean to sound harsh, but that's the reality of enablement. All right? You saving that money is buying his drugs for him. So you need to no longer contribute. I tell every family, I don't know if every family, but I try to mention every family, one of the reasons they need to do an intervention for themselves is, let's say, heaven forbid, there was nothing they could do about this addiction. or just didn't choose to do anything, and all of a sudden that person died because of their addiction. Let's say you're talking about a 50-year-old alcoholic that drank so much that his liver was shot, or was drinking and driving and drove off the road, killed himself or somebody else. How would that family feel? I mean, are there words for it? Devastated. Okay? Not only would they feel devastated, but they would feel partly responsible because they didn't do enough, or they didn't do anything, depending on the situation. They would think, why didn't I do more? Why didn't I go to that Al-Anon meeting and talk to them? Why didn't I call up a treatment center? Why didn't I call the police when he got in the car? Why? My fault, my fault, my fault. And intervention, if done correctly, is about the family. That if we do it right, if Alex would have said no to treatment, and we would have done it correctly, you would have got your closure, and anything that would have happened to Alex after the intervention, while it could have been devastating, would not make you feel responsible and accountable. Am I correct?
Yes.
That's what my goal is in an intervention, to give family that closure they need. I go into every intervention. Like I said, my stats are somewhere around 90%, my company and my own, of getting people into treatment. I'll tell you right now, I plan on every intervention on being that 10%. I plan on every intervention failing. I teach that family, here's what we have to do when this thing fails. You know, plan for the worst, hope for the best. That's my mentality. And gratefully, most of our interventions are successful. But you know what? I also know that Alex is going to be out of treatment in a few days. I'm not here for you every day. I am over the phone, but I can't walk with you every step of the way. I have to give you the tools so you can deal with this, because it isn't over.
And I have to pick them up, and I have to use them, because they only work if I choose to use them. So I have to keep going to Al-Anon meetings, I have to keep my recovery going, and our family members have to keep our arms linked and remember that he's in recovery, and we are united for him to recover, not to use again, and for us not to anymore, which is really hard.
Yeah.
And it's really uncomfortable, but the more that you do it, the easier it gets, because what you've got is a set of principles by which you're living your life. And it gets easier and easier to say to a user, you know what, it's against the law to drink and drive. It might be uncomfortable, but you can say, I'm not going to get in a vehicle with you if I know you've been drinking. Because believe it or not, it's real easy to just go, I don't know, I don't want to know, let's go. And to, like you say, that long term, just look the other way. Okay, so you know, the more you use these principles, the more you treat that person with dignity and respect, and say, these are my boundaries. It's about me keeping myself healthy and safe too.
As we talk about bottom lines, the reason why families usually enable versus go to bottom lines is enabling is a lot easier. It's easier to keep a blind eye to things. It's easier to just accept things and hope they get better.
And it's really hard to change yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Some examples of bottom lines we talk about: giving money to them, letting them live with you. A very powerful example of the bottom line is not inviting them to family get-togethers, which, if you read between the lines, basically says they're cut out of family entirely. Okay, it's very hard. Think about, you know, if you have an addict that's been using for 20 years, and say they're using heroin or they're using meth or something hardcore addict. Out of those last 20 years that they've been using, maybe they made Christmas 5 times. And families will say, well, why should we not invite him over to Christmas? He doesn't show up anyway. It's a big difference between an addict not showing up because they're too hungover, they're too drunk, they're too miserable, they don't want to see the family, versus them not being welcome. Bottom lines have a profound effect on an addict or alcoholic's behavior. Okay, and that's what you don't do bottom lines for effect. You do them for yourself. You don't invite him over to Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner because it's unfair to you the stress you have to deal with if he's going to show up. How's he going to be? Is it going to be another family disaster when he gets drunk and belligerent? You can remove yourself from that situation. A nice effect of what happens is he's going to be affected. It's going to raise his bottom up, and he's going to be more inclined to want to change. Another example of bottom lines is small children, protecting the small children. If you're talking about your husband, you take the children away from him if you feel they're being affected. You don't do that again to punish him. You do that to save your children, save yourself. I don't care if you're talking about a brother that's an alcoholic or an addict. Don't let him see your children. You want to subject your children to that. Protect yourselves. And again, it's not punishment, because we've offered a solution during an intervention. We've offered them a chance at treatment. And when we start doing bottom lines, it's not slamming a door on them. It's saying, you know what, a door is always open when you're ready for treatment. Okay? again, we don't use the bottom lines for effect. We always say there's 3 different reasons why you use, or 3 different reasons to use bottom lines. One is so you're not affected by it. Second one is so you're not contributing to it anymore. And the third reason is because eventually, through the course of bottom lines, they will begin to feel the consequences of their using. I talked about the family with the girlfriend and the father. He's going to feel consequences. Right now he doesn't have to because look, girlfriend picked me up from the airport. Look, her father paid for my trip back. But he's going to eventually feel the consequences of not having contact with the rest of his family. Eventually, soon-to-be father-in-law or just whatever he is not always going to be there like his mother, like his father would have. And he's going to need that kind of connection. And if he doesn't have it, he's going to change. And it may take a while. And that's hard for families to deal with. All right? I can say with almost 100% certainty that every family I've ever dealt with that has stuck to the bottom lines, that everybody that was involved, 100% of them have gone to treatment. 100%. It's nothing profound. Addicts cannot be addicts by themselves. They can't. Okay? They want help. They want to be that better person. They want their family. They want to be better. If families stick to bottom lines, it works every single time. The families we deal with, it doesn't take long in the conversation to realize, well, what do you mean he's still living at home? We went through all this, and all of a sudden the kid's back at home, and you're wondering why he's not in treatment. We always say, whenever we start off an intervention, I always ask the family, why would your son be in treatment right now? Why? You're paying for his bills. You invite him over to every family function. He doesn't have to work. He doesn't have to have a car because you give him a car. Some families will give him his own credit card. They're paying for his cell phone. Why would that kid quit using drugs? He has no reason to. He has no consequence. We give them consequence. It's not like we're giving it to them. We're just letting them feel their own consequences. All right, you guys have any questions about anything? That's all I have for you. I'll open up right now to Q&A.